hope you're enjoying my dad's videos. Make sure to share this video with family and friends, like and subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you get notified for all my dad's new videos. My social media will be tagged down below so you can follow it. And just remember, Jesus loves you.
Hi guys, just one little factor here before we start this video here today. If for any reason my YouTube channel gets taken down, which could happen because we're challenging the deep state and we're challenging the powers behind the scenes. But if it does get taken down, I'm going to share the link below here. We have a website, drcharlieward.co.uk, and you can subscribe on there to our updates and our newsletters, etc., that are being produced by Lee Hemington. But you'll be able to keep in touch with what's going on. So at the moment, everything is nice and smooth. But if for any reason we get taken down, you simply go to my website, drcharlieward.co.uk, and register there, and you'll get all the information as to where we are or where you can view our videos. Hi guys, welcome today. We've got Sacha Stone, Michael Tellinger and Alpa Soni with us today to discuss what's going on. Welcome guys.
Hey guys. Hello everyone.
Hey Charles, Charlie, Alpa, and my brother Sacha, good to see you.
Likewise.
Well, we were just saying, Sacha, I did a video this morning sort of having a little rant about waking up to what's actually really happening in the world. And I made 2 points. Number one, the point that the virus, the vaccine, all that was a smokescreen. But number two was that it was nothing more than the common cold. And in Madrid, we've learned that 2 children were taken off their family and put into a quarantine center because their temperatures were high, taken away from their families. And I was pointing out that this is to wake people up to what's really going on. Corrupt government.
Well, agreed. Yeah. Agreed fully, Charles. I mean, I'm certain that multiple countries, especially in the middle powers and in the developing nations and small island states, are taking their instructions now really through the rogue elements within the BIS and the IMF and the World Bank, who have now taken command and control and are still trying to ramp up these deviant protocols, which make no sense at all. But from a very positive perspective, from the, let's say, the Trump Earth Alliance white hat perspective, I think it's a good thing because it's showing everyone in the mainframe, every John Doe is now able to see that the entire infrastructure and apparatus of government is rogue and has always been in the thrall of the globalist financial interests.
No, I totally agree with you. The sound was a little bit out of sync there, but it understood exactly what you were saying there. For people in the know, it's wonderful because we're coming through this. I was just on the phone to the Philippines, and they've just told me that they've now gone back into total lockdown.
We're expecting a lockdown by the end of this month, aren't we, Charlie? Yeah, everywhere.
I think it'll happen.
In the UK? In the UK?
I think it will happen during the course of this month, because we're in the final throes now of making sure that we arrest all the deep state that need to be arrested. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, and we were told right on day one, every time that Trump mentions law and order, he's arrested another big name. So yeah. we got another tweet last night, law and order. So I was grateful for that one.
I think a lot's changed since this weekend, Charlie, we were saying earlier, because of the protests in London, huge, Germany, Berlin, yeah. So
did you see Belarus? Belarus as well. It looks like there were at least 200,000 people there.
Wow. That's huge. Yeah, in London, Trafalgar Square, we had David Icke.
Yeah, I saw David doing his thing on stage. Yeah, very inspiring. But that is actually a point that I want to pick up in this discussion. Is quite a long article I wrote yesterday. Is what did I call it? Lost in freedom. Or the freedom delusion, or whatever I called it. And this is quite dangerous right now, because while the world is mobilizing or waking up, and people in larger and larger numbers are starting to peacefully protest this complete insanity on the assault on all our liberties. And people are all saying freedom, freedom. And David Icke was there, in London saying freedom and all the slogans he was using. The problem I have with all this is, so that's great. So we're going to attain freedom. What does that mean? What does that mean? What, do we go back to where we came from, where the government controlled by the banks control us? Do we think that is freedom? Or do we go to something new? Well, if we want to go to something new, what is that something new? And this is what I have a problem with, because very few people have presented a new or a serious alternative that is workable, manageable, achievable, without violence or protest. And so my fear, every time I see this, is you got this huge, mass, energetic rise in freedom, freedom, freedom. What is it going to look like? So this is where I really would love to call everybody to just look up One Small Town, how simple it is. And that's what blows my mind, is how simple the solutions are and how easily we can achieve them. And we just need, if the hundreds of thousands of millions of people around the world that protested this weekend, if those millions of people were aware of how simple the solution is and how simply we can extract ourselves from the current system and just smoothly transition into a new system through the One Small Town philosophy. And I'm pushing the One Small Town because I firmly believe it is a very simple solution. I think we've got a home run. So my objective here through these discussions and these talks is just make people aware of the solutions. Yes, as I always say, be aware of the terrible truth. Make sure you understand where it all comes from. And everyone on this call is aware of what's going on. Each one of us individually has done such incredible work to make people aware of the terrible truth and the atrocities that are being committed and all that. But now we got to really stand together and start presenting a united voice of solutions. What is it that we're going to do? What is this freedom that we want? And that can only be achieved once a critical mass of people truly understand what the problems are, who's in control of the problems, and how we bypass and outsmart those people that are controlling the situation that has got us into this
Well,
mess.
Michael, let me jump in right there, because that is the problem, and the firewall there is something called media. So, and that's my problem with the big marches in Berlin, Belarus, London, and elsewhere, is that you've still got this condom interceding between what's taking place and what we think is taking place, or what the mainframe believes is taking place. And belief is everything. I mean, all of the mutancy of our civilization has eventuated because of the manipulation of the perception of reality that has taken place, as we know, through the Babylonian priesthoods, the dream spinning, the monotheistic religious orders, all of that stuff. But right now, we've got millions and millions and millions of enlightened, actualized living men and women of the living soil enjoining force all around the world. And that's only just begun. But we've still got the mainstream media telling us and telling the rest of the world that a few thousand conspiracy theorists gathered at Nelson's column in Trafalgar Square. No, pal, the biggest goddamn protest in the history of the United Kingdom occurred 24 hours ago. Big difference in the perception, and the thing that comes back into the gestalt, to the zeitgeist. We are then cowed. Society is cowed into thinking, well, that was a protest, but it obviously didn't make any real difference. So until we turn our gun sights away from the establishment and the status quo, which is always this godless, witless, nameless, faceless, multi-headed Medusa thing, until we turn our attention-themed creature that no one can quite identify and move it onto mainstream media, the chairman, the CEOs, the living trustees of the Associated News Network, Agence France Presse, basically a Reuters network. These are the deviants who are standing between humans and our capacity to recognize what's actually taking place with the flag of the family. So that's my issue. We should all of us be looking at media, Who are they? Chairmen, CEOs, put their faces up and take these devils to task.
I totally agree with you on that front, because one of the biggest things that we're seeing right now is that we're seeing it in Europe. The numbers that they quoted assembled in Berlin were thousands, and yet there was 4 million plus. The numbers they're talking about in London were hundreds, and there was 45,000. But if it was a Black Lives Matter march, there would be millions there, and there would be 25 people.
Right.
We're up against a very, very corrupt media. And for whatever reason, I don't know what the reason is, but Donald Trump's team have made it very clear that the media will be one of the last ones to be taken down. So we're having to put up with all the bullshit for now. And we've got to endure a few more months of bullshit, I think.
You know, I just wanted to point out at grassroots level, for me, you know, I keep everything simple. And within my sort of network of people that I know, it's so interesting. Some of the most academic and the banker type friends that I have, I just mentioned in conversation, because I try not to bring this stuff up in a social environment because it gets a bit, you know, heated. And I just said, you know, to one of my friends, you know that the feds have been taken down by the US Treasury. And he's like, I'm a banker, I should know this. That's the most stupidest thing that you said to me. I'm like, dude, seriously, like, I'm not an investment banker. I haven't followed this whole academic path like yourself and, you know, done this degree, that degree. But, you know, the feds have been taken down by the US Treasury. It's a hostile takeover. It was happened in March. Alpa, you're talking absolute rubbish. You know, I'd know. And this is pseudo-intellectual sort of, I don't want to say arrogance, but it's at grassroots.
It is arrogance.
Arrogance. I'm trying to be. It
is arrogance. It's arrogance, stupidity, ignorance, and cognitive dissonance of the highest.
That's exactly what I was going to say. And this is the thing that you were saying, Sacha. You know, these protests, great. You know, we're all sort of fighting back and say no to vaccines, and the whole coronavirus situation is just completely a load of, you know, crap. But the understanding and the stuff that's circulating on social media, you know, people are like, oh, this is just rubbish. You know, they lean more to the mainstream. So that's the battle we have right now, the mainstream media. And, you know, even within my family, they lean still to, oh, but it didn't come in the news. And this is where we are at now. So these protests, right, I mean, did it have the coverage? People don't even realize what these protests were for. So we are sat here thinking, yeah, great, this is happening. This is a movement in the right direction. The energy is changing. But I'm with you there.
Well, you know, you spoke about your friend, the banker, with the PhD. Actually, it's also flipping the other way. In Tanzania today, it's a fantastic meme going around saying there's no lockdown in Tanzania, and that's because the president of Tanzania has a PhD in chemistry. And of course, we know that was the guy, the African leader, who sent pawpaws and various goats in to have their blood analyzed, and they came back as COVID-19 positive.
Yeah, that was interesting.
I love the story of Tanzania. Many people in South Africa call it Tanzania. So I love that story of the Tanzanian president. It just gives so much hope. I just wish more African leaders would take their lead from him and actually stand up as Africans against this tyranny. It's spectacular. But I must tell you that in South Africa, since we're talking about Africa, there's over the last month, there's been a very interesting new political development and a whole new tone that's busy rising. I don't know if you've picked up on this, but it's for the first time in 20 years, I'm suddenly feeling quite excited about the South African political arena.
Yeah.
Herman Mashaba launched his political party 2 days ago. He was the ex-mayor of Johannesburg, which is obviously the biggest city in South Africa. And he's running for premier of Gauteng to basically win Gauteng, the most populous and wealthiest province in South Africa, Joburg and Pretoria. And he is just sweeping across the country. He's becoming so popular, literally in the last 2 months since he started campaigning to launch his new political party. He's saying all the right things. He's calling the ANC to task about the bribery, corruption, and disgusting behavior for the last 26 years. And his main objective, which I think is possibly the wrong thing, is to see the downfall of the ANC. But while he's saying that, he is also saying all the right things to attract clear, normal, moderate, middle-of-the-road thinking people who just want beautiful lives, peace, and liberty. So I think he's going to have a huge following very, very quickly. He's in all the mainstream news media. So they're certainly not snubbing him and ignoring him the way they ignored me when I ran the Ubuntu Party in 3 elections, right? So I have some experience in running politics in South Africa. I ran twice in provincial elections and once in national elections where I ran for president. So I know how it works and how little media exposure you get.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're interviewing Herman Mashaba on all the mainstream news channels is huge.
And Michael, he's forced the South African president to come out and say and confess that his own party is deeply implicated in coronavirus corruption. So on all fronts, it's huge.
Yeah, and not only that, even now there's a hearing this week, I believe, where even Cyril Ramaphosa, our president, is going to be questioned and cross-examined about corruption and all these things. There's a whole lot. There's suddenly this mass awakening, and you can just see on Twitter and other social media how the people everywhere are realizing that the ANC has been responsible for the mess in the country. Just like the Americans are starting to realize that the Democrats are responsible for the mess in that country. It's a very interesting parallel that's going on here.
I can see a big change coming because I remember when I lived in South Africa myself, and you had the tribalism between the Xhosas and the Zulus. You had many other different tribes. And I just see that the awakening that we're coming to, I don't see Democrat and Republicans being a part of it. I don't see Conservatives or Liberals or Labour being a part of it. I don't see the ANC and all these other parties being a part of it. I see the difference between good and evil. And I see that a GESARA and NESARA, whatever you want to call it, it'll have a new name. But a government, it'll be our choice to vote for people, doesn't matter about party, who will stand up for our rights. And if I had my way, I'd say you can be in power for life, but we're going to vote every single year. So you've got 1 year to prove yourself. And if you're good, you can stay in power. And knowing Trump and Putin, as I do, Putin's found a way to be in power forever. And he'll be teaching Trump how to do the same. But if you've got to vote every single year and you're doing a good job, which I think Trump deep down would want to happen anyway, then we've got control of our politicians, which we've lost control of.
Well, along with that,
Michael, can I very quickly speak to that? Because this is something that's so core to what I'm working on with different governments right now. My concern with what you've just postulated, Charlie, is that you scarcely have time in 48 months in a 4-year tenure, which is the usual tenure for a president or prime minister incoming. You've scarcely got time there to be able to implement the policy changes that you want. So even good guys coming into power can scarcely get their raft legislations in time to make any palpable changes in the end of their first tenure, which is why you normally have to have a second tenure in order to create any kind of legacy. So I think that if there was 1 year voting, it would be pandemonium. That's in my view, being an analyst of 20 years on this.
Yeah, I agree with
this vile thing to work. That's called language. So that's my concern about that. I would suggest a simpler source code, Charlie, would be the eradication of the technology of government altogether, especially as it concerns governments being a hybrid of priesthood bankers, because that's all that government is. It's an extension of priesthood bankers, Sabbatean banking. Put it that way. So if we eradicate Sabbatean banking, we lose the technology of mind control, i.e. government, and we then revert back to what Michael is talking about, decentralized fractal models of auto-determination. And that is the only way, in my view, that we're going to see any redemption.
Absolutely.
No, I couldn't agree more with what you just said there. But the point I was trying to get across is that we need to be able to hold these people to account. And I'll give you a little example. In London, we've got a Lord Mayor who's absolutely useless. And he's got a job there for 4 years and you can't get rid of him. So we've got to find a way to get rid of people who are useless.
That's the stocks and rotten tomatoes. That's why we had them back in the medieval days. We just need to reintroduce that.
Exactly.
That's exactly, what you spoke about now is exactly why the One Small Town simple plan and model is so powerful. It's literally once people wrap their heads around it, how simple it is and how easy it is to manage, and create prosperity and abundance in communities, towns, even cities. You can even run a city like this with a few million people. It's the same model. It's just fractals of a small thing. It's just so easy to put this in place and manage it. And if somebody doesn't perform, the community knows who it is it's not performing. And it's very simple to put the right people in place, because everybody knows everybody, and everybody knows who's useless and who's not. Yeah. So
this transition is going to take some time.
But also, I've been part of the problem for many, many years, because I've been helping move money around the world to make sure certain governments get into power. So I've known that people's votes have not counted. So having been on that side, I can't really blame the people for wrong government for voting for the wrong people, because it wasn't their fault. But nowadays, we've learned so much about what's wrong, and we now have the opportunity to vote for what's right. So we've gone through an educational period, and it's difficult to point the finger at people when they weren't in control of the vote, because it was so corrupted behind the scenes.
So yeah, and Charlie, usury is the root of all evil in this world. And I think that we've got to increasingly just step back from being so goddamn clever and go back to these elemental notions. You remove usury from any kind of economic format, and you get a natural, organic, contributionist return to an agrarian culture of people loving and begetting love and mending broken things. And that's what we should be getting on with as human beings. Simple as.
I love the fact that you use the word contributionist, Sacha. Makes my heart sing. So I just want to quickly point out one more thing, to come back to South African political arena and Herman Mashaba and his new political party. I don't want people that are watching this video suddenly thinking, oh, what is Stillinger now going back into politics, or is he supporting politics? No, that's not at all. I'm fully 100% behind changing the existing system, but we can't just do it by chopping the head off. We need to do it organically and simply, and the once more time model is that system. But we still need a stable political arena. We can't have anarchy and chaos and all that, because that just leads nowhere. And violence and looting and all that kind of stuff, which is just horrific watching that in the USA. I'm literally stunned when I see what's going on there, and shocked. So we need political stability with sober, clear-thinking politicians who are doing the right thing for the people. That might not be the final solution, but it's a very important step towards that final solution. Now, in South Africa, the ANC has kept this country under a fascist grip for 26 years. You know, they've threatened people over the 26 years. They basically, before every election, they'd go out and send their thugs to all the small villages and the beautiful Africans that live in their villages and their tribal cultures. And they tell them, if you don't vote for the ANC, we will take your pensions and your medical aid away. This is how they threaten people. It's despicable. And these people don't know. They're beautiful human beings with beautiful hearts. They don't know about the world and politics and how dark and evil these guys are. So they think, oh, wow, we better vote for the ANC. And this is how they've kept the power for 26 years. Now, the other thing that they do very quickly is that our governors and our mayors are not appointed by the people. Our governors and mayors are appointed by the political party who is in control of that province. And that's a huge problem.
There's the problem.
So
There's the problem.
One of the things that Herman Mashaba is really forcing is that under his leadership, mayors and presidents and leaders will be appointed by the people so that they're accountable for their promises that they make during their election campaign. So that is a huge move away from the current political oppressive system that the ANC has kept South African people, under oppression.
Beautiful.
I've often, sorry, with Africa.
No, carry on. I just wanted to wind up by saying, there's a great meme that I picked up this morning, which says, so let me get this straight. I'm paying taxes on my wages, then paying sales tax to spend my own money, then paying income tax on money that was already taxed. Then when I die, my kids pay the death tax on my money that was already taxed. And that, my friends, is what government gives you. Centralized government.
I couldn't agree.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And the point I was going to make was, having lived in South Africa and been through a lot of African countries, I've found the African people in general to be absolutely beautiful people, in general.
Yeah.
And I've often said that if you actually gave them what they were entitled to, which is a land rich in natural resource, if they had what they were entitled to, they wouldn't steal, they wouldn't kill, and it would be one of the most beautiful continents in the world.
Oh, yeah.
As a country, it's absolutely stunning. I mean, if you've never been to South Africa or Africa, you've missed out, because it's a beautiful country. And, you know, even the garden route, George and I is in the wilderness, stunning part. And then the northern Transvaal, the game reserves. Then you go up into Zimbabwe, which was the old Rhodesia, you know. And you go further up and up and up. It's a beautiful country with beautiful people that have been robbed blind by not corrupt African governments so much, corrupt Belgian governments, Dutch governments, English governments, French governments.
French.
Yeah,
it's all the Vatican there, Charlie. You're describing the extension of the Black Papacy, the papacy proper, the Vatican complex, and then, of course, the Anglo-American contribution to globalism. But essentially, the Crown of England, you're right, the Belgian, French, Portuguese, and Spanish and Dutch have done a tremendous amount of damage. But I mean, I think you'll find on the fulcrum of the evil empire, or the empire of evil, you will find that it's essentially an extension of the British Crown. And of course, as you'll well know, I mean, I grew up in sub-Saharan Africa. I am multi-generational white African, and Cecil John Rhodes, God love him, characters like him, the De Beers, the Oppenheimer compacts, you know, these are the pioneering creatures under Victoriana that forged a bloodied, you know, highway across the spine of Mama Africa, ending up, of course, in Southern Africa, when finally white man's poison was kind of pushed over the edge in the Cape. It was still in the thrall of those same Anglo-American Vatican corporate hegemonial interests, and to this day is still. So that's the problem. That never went away. That corporate imperial hegemony is still what owns the registered land holding and the registered souls. Every African soul on that continent, through their birth bond and their treasury bond and the collaterals held through the BIS and and the Reserve Bank of those nations, goes back to the BIS, and through the BIS, the old clearinghouse of the U.S. Treasury, Fed Reserve, Bank of England, back to the Vatican. So at what point do we again look, refine, clarify the lens of our focus onto the atom seed of the evil, which is the parent corporation? That for me is really what we should spend a bit of time talking about, because all the rest of the helter-skelter is going to continue one way or the other in new generational cycles, new expressions and iterations of the same old dialectic. I think this is the first time in the history of the world that I've researched and understood that we have a chance truly of completely routing out that evil empire. And I do attribute it, Charlie, to the folks that you're very attuned to with this white hat element that is issuing out of North America.
Yeah.
I think at grassroots level, again, and I say this time and time again, for someone who's simple like myself, you know, the awareness is just so hooked in the mainstream media, and this is the issue. You know, I'm speaking to people from all walks of life, and then there's me in this truth community where I'm like, I've had this sudden awakening a few months ago. You know, I was down the spiritual path myself, completely shut myself off mainstream media and media entertainment, and then I've come across all this knowledge in the space of like 4 or 5 months, and it's sort of overwhelming for me. But when you're speaking to just your everyday person, they're like, well, we all are, but there's just cognitive dissonance at every stage. They just don't want to listen, and it's unhooking that. It's unhooking from those paradigms of the yester sort of life. You know, they don't get it. They just don't understand, and we have a problem.
I think it is unhooking as we speak, you know, and I watch what's going on in the USA very carefully every day, because for me, as many people, what happens say is the
Sorry to
heartbeat.
interject there. Sorry to interject there, but it is. I agree, but not as fast. For me, in the Asian community, I have a big problem. Yeah, and the previous chats that I've done with Charlie have been the reciprocity haven't been from my own people. I've almost been kind of looked at like a cuckoo head. Like, you know, what is she talking about? You know, it's getting away, unhooking from the paradigms of the educational system. You know, the government talk is still there. We're still talking about the social distancing. We're still talking about it's that narrative that's going on. And I'm not going to assume here, but there is silence from my own people. And that's what I find interesting. So for me to kind of like, I messaged Charlie and I just was drawn to his channel, and I sort of said, I want to talk to you because, you know, I'm in this new world. I don't understand what was going on before. I was very much asleep, and then I've just suddenly woken up, and it just all started like unraveling very quickly. It all made sense from an inner standing. You know, from a spiritual context, I understood that. I'm really into my, you know, spirituality and that sort of paradigm. But talking to the everyday person, I find it really, really difficult, and it's unhooking that.
So what seems to me, Alpa, is that since you from your own admission here, you're relatively new to a lot of this information.
Yes, I am.
What you'll find is you're still wading through the circle or the wall of friends that you surrounded yourself with throughout your life that were on the same conscious level that you are. You haven't yet penetrated and found all people that might be your friends, but they haven't acknowledged to you that they actually are on the same page. And what will happen as you start pursuing this new philosophy, this new vision, and you are vocal about it, you'll start recognizing the people in your circle of friends that are of the same mind. So what I'd like to say to you is don't be afraid. Say these things, throw out the little hooks, little baits, and see who takes the bait, and then you can take it from there. You don't have to go out like a reborn Christian and say, oh, Jesus will save your life, and shout it down everybody's throat, because that's what a lot of people, when they find the truth, want to go out and they think they're the only one.
Well, I've been quite strategic about this, you know, because I understand where everyone is mentally with this. You know, there's a lot that's been thrown at everyone, and I employ compassion first of all and understanding, because, you know, you're trying to unhook this way of thinking from people that they think the government's been telling them the truth their whole life, and, you know, it's a difficult task, but it had to be slowly. I had to plant the seeds. I had to start saying, hey, have you considered this? Have you considered that? And I've always been met with resistance. But now slowly, interestingly, I'm getting the odd message from friends around the world saying, hey, Alpa, like what you're doing. That's it. You know,
and it's going to start happening. It's going to start happening more and more. And what happens is when people wake up and they suddenly realize what's going on, then they start to open themselves up to new media, to alternative media, alternative TV channels and podcasts and so forth. And then you realize that there's this whole world of alternative information that you never knew about. And mainstream media is just what mainstream does. But there's a whole nother universe out there that carries this body of knowledge and information. That is why it's growing. That is why it's picking up momentum. And always keep in mind, you don't need more than 50%. The consciousness field is not a democracy. The consciousness field works on laws of nature, and laws of nature function on things, everything to do with fractals, the nature of the fractality of the laws of nature. And all we need to do to change the world is reach a critical mass of conscious, like-minded people in the world. That's it. And I believe we are now so close. And maybe through some divine intervention that I certainly have not expected or didn't expect, maybe the 3rd of November is that breaking point. I believe it is, because when Trump wins, that sends a shockwave to every other leader in the world. If you don't do what we've done in the USA, you're done. We're coming for you. You better start serving your people, take care of the central bank, and start delivering to your people and releasing the people from all the bureaucracy, the red tape, and the bullshit that we've had to deal with. And Trump is that catalyst. And slowly but surely, it's sinking in, even to the Americans. If you saw the response after the RNC, C-SPAN radio TV network, how they were inundated with phone calls of people phoning in saying that's it. I used to be a Democrat. My family are Democrats all our lives for generations. We're now voting Trump because we actually can't stand what's going on in the Democratic Party. They become the Communist Party of the USA. It's happening. It's what we always refer to as the silent majority. And more people in the USA, as you may know, are not sharing their feelings, their political feelings. They're just keeping stum about that because they can see
stigma attached to Trump, though. This is the issue. There is a silent majority, and there are people that are leaning towards Trump, but it's the stigma because it's the social conditioning. If I even mention Trump's name, oh my God, that makes me a racist.
Yes, exactly.
That goes behind that. So I understand. I do, but yes, but I agree definitely. There is a silent majority there.
Well, Alpa, welcome. Welcome to the wisdom of insecurity, Alpa. As a frontline activist, you'll learn that actually the wisdom of insecurity becomes your greatest friend, because the more you default into that inner knowing, as you call the inner scape, or what did you call it? The inner standing. Yeah, and that's a beautiful notion. But the more you default into that template, the more you will go through a socio-alchemical process of increasingly being disenfranchised from the family bit. Can kind of hurt family, friends, and then broader community. But I just spent an hour on the phone last night with my mum and my sister, who are holed up in Portugal, where my family live. And it was the first time we've ever spoken in this way. And they basically said to me, yeah, you've been right for like 20 years, and and they've now become militant activists in the last few months. Militant. And they said that they've disenfranchised themselves from their entire community. There's like 4 of them standing in Portugal, like with wagons circled, and everyone thinks they're holding on to the little ember of truth that's left in Portugal. And yet the fire, the glow that's coming out of them, I've never seen that. It's a beautiful thing. Anyway, that's my 2 pence worth, is that enjoy this process that you've got happening around you, this burgeoning chaos and kind of breakdown of the social alchemy, because that is how profits are forged. And in all of our ways, we on this platform here are all acting the role, the archetype of prophet, of seer, of oracle. It's a very important archetype for any human soul to evolve into that state. Own that space and be in that space and be unabashedly, unashamedly in that flame, and hold true to that knowing. Your pure truth and your right action are the navigation system, and all you require is pure truth and right action in the now to manifest the highest outcome in life. And then you get to a point, which you probably will, where you start getting really slated by the community, by the truth community. Michael's been through that mill. I've been through that mill. We continuously go through that. But you'll have people making films about you and saying the most disgusting and heinous things about you, making up your past. I mean, the wickedness and the evil that you are required to be a part of the process of bifurcation of good and ill, good and evil. That comes as part of the robe that you have to wear. Just stand in truth and walk that line.
But I've been getting these messages for a long time, and I said to Charlie in our first discussion that we did a few weeks back, that I actually heard about the virus, the coronavirus. This lady came into this spa, this healing spa that I was working in at the time in 2011, I think 2012, and she said there's going to be this pandemic, and I think she said the name, and then in 2015 the same story came back to into my attention again, and then here we are, like in 2020, the same, it's actually happened. And it was your video that I saw in my first few weeks with the one about the birth certificates and Bibi
Bacchus,
Bibi Bacchus, that was the first one. That hit me straight away. It was so powerful, Sacha, and I shared it with everyone in my groups and stuff, and they just thought I was a lunatic. But that was the start, and then obviously all the stories about the children, and that's where I sort of thought, no, I'm not someone that goes on social media. I'm quite shy, actually. I haven't sort of posted loads of debates and articles on social media ever before than I have now. And it's the, you know, the motivation is about the children. 100% for me. It's just, I've come in from that angle, and then everything else pieced around the, you know, the whole subject with the horrible things, the heinous things that have happened to the children, and it's all connected to the children, right? The blood of children is, you know, in the world's hands. You know, it's horrible. And for me, it woke me up so quickly. I went into a state of shock for 3 weeks. I had to like recover. I couldn't deal with that. It was so huge and powerful for me, and that's what, you know, gave me my voice.
Beautiful. That's fantastic. Well, thank you. I feel deeply honored to have taken your intellectual virginity. Thank you for that.
I mean, to just
Very good. What I'd like to do, if I may, is just come back to the central bank issue, because there's another development that I forgot to mention earlier in South Africa, where the ANC and the government has now officially decided that they're going to nationalize the South African Reserve Bank. I don't know if that information has reached you yet. That's huge news.
Massive.
Because they say their reason is, and this is really big, and all South Africans that are watching this, or anybody else who has not yet figured out what central banks are, how they work, and how they're the tool of control over our governments and so forth, please be aware of this and watch some of my Ubuntu videos, because I go through the whole origins of money and the central banking and how it works. You can watch Sacha talk about it in great detail, but there's a lot of that information out there. So the South African government is now, you know, talking about nationalizing the central bank. Now, to many people, that'll be like, wow, that's fantastic news. But hold on, just be careful. The reasons they quote is that the South African Reserve Bank is one of 8 or 9 left in the world that still has private shareholders. Now, this is right. So I know, because my good friend Stephen Goodson, who was a shareholder and a director of the South African Reserve Bank, whose 2 books I've got here on the secrets of international banking and the South African Reserve Bank. He was an absolute genius. He died recently. He was actually, he ran with the Ubuntu Party as one of the Ubuntu Party candidates with us in 2016 and 2014. So I got to know Stephen very well. But the problem with nationalizing the South African Reserve Bank, let's do away with the shareholders. That's something that they're going to have to deal with. How that ever happened, I don't understand. Well, I do understand it, but I don't want to go into it right now because it takes us down a different tangent. And what the problem is that if you're going to nationalize a central bank, which is owned by the Rothschilds, obviously, just keep in mind, this is the Rothschild global banking empire with all the Rockefeller and all the banking family subsidiaries that own the entire global banking bloody mess, with the exception, obviously, of China and Russia. Possibly not. I don't know. You might have more information that they actually own that as well. But the problem is that what they say is that the central bank of the country should belong to the state, not to the people. And there's the problem. There's the catch. So they want to nationalize it so it belongs to the state. Well, what is the South African state? This is the South African government. And the South African registered as a corporation. So now what they're doing is they want to take control of the central bank, and the ownership is going to belong to the South African government, not to the people. Therein lies the rub. This is a huge problem, and a lot of people don't understand it. So I will engage in this, but also from my side, I've been dying to get involved in social media and start spreading and doing more stuff, but I've been really holding myself back because we are waiting, as we discussed in the previous chat we had, Charlie, with the other Charlie. What we discussed there is about the funding that we're expecting to land for the Ubuntu movement and the One Small Town strategy, and the huge mobilization of African agriculture. 60 million African farmers that we're about to empower, and so much more. I'm just giving you the surface, the paint of this immense movement that we're about to launch. And these billionaires that are just coming out of hiding, just suddenly saying, hold on, I don't want to keep funding the world that we've left behind. If I don't put my money into something that's going to provide a secure, safe, and a beautiful future, not just for me, but for my children, what have I been working for all my life? So a lot of these conscious billionaires are coming out of the cracks. Even yesterday, I was introduced to another billionaire who wants to fund the Ubuntu movement and everything we're doing. With the offers of funding, obviously, comes a lot of red tape and so forth. and negotiations and so, but we're working our way through that. So I've been holding back on sharing a lot of this information because I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. So I'm giving you a hint of what's about to come. The world, as we know it, is changed dramatically.
Changing.
I hope those billionaires make their withdrawals sooner rather than later, because there is a consideration that anyone who's earned more than $1 billion on the face of the earth may well be implicated and at the bitch end of some of these executive orders that Trump quite rightly introduced a couple of years ago, connected to the seizure of assets around the world. And I'm saying that not to deride any of these noble billionaires that you're talking about, but the fact of the matter is, as Charlie will be an expert on, when you get to a certain threshold of wealth, it is almost impossible that your wealth is not deeply, profoundly entangled with deep state wealth. And then you become part of a collateral domino of takedown. So I'm just suggesting that, that might play a problem in the days ahead. If Trump does come back in on the biggest landslide in the history of politics, as I've been predicting for the last 6 months, and others are as well, I think that you'll find that he's going to be pulling out swords and cutting huge swathes out of the kind of billionaire sector. So Charlie may want to comment a little to that.
No, I totally agree with that. And the one thing that has become very, very clear with him, right from day one when I was moving currency around, the parameters changed the minute he got into power. And it wasn't just proof of funds, it was source of funds and history of funds. Once he got into that realm, I went, wow, that's new. So even if you've got billions in the bank, proof of funds is one thing. Source of funds and history of funds is something completely different. So it tells what's in your DNA. One point I want to make is, at this moment in time, I was asking about, because I mentioned about resetting our moral compass. We've actually got the perfect people right in front of our eyes. In New Zealand, you've got the Maoris. In Australia, you've got the Aborigines. In South Africa, you've got different tribal leaders who can reset your compass. We've got the people right there who can help us. If you believe in God, you can ask God. If you believe in Allah, you can ask Allah. If you don't believe in anything, you can ask your mother or your grandmother. They'll help you reset your compass. It's right in front of our very eyes, because we all need to reset our moral compasses as to where we're really at. And obviously for Sacha and Michael, you've been doing it on a regular basis. This is why you're so accurate and grounded in your views and so informative to other people. And we appreciate, certainly from my audience, we appreciate the pair of you, because what you're doing now is really, really constructive, the pair of you. And I just say thank you to you both.
It's very kind, Charlie, and thank you for raising this point. It's beautiful to bring some resolution in the conversation to the mystical traditions of culture, because you're absolutely right. I mean, we can talk all we like about the intellectual acrobats of economics and social ecology and blah blah blah. But unless we anchor this regenesis that's coming into the mystical traditions at the cultural level and the shamanic level, you're absolutely right. Thank you for making the point.
What I find interesting is that both Sacha and I are pale Africans, and that come from sub-Saharan Africa, which is interesting. So, I always find these kind of coincidences quite interesting. Now I lost my train of thought. They're talking about traditional leaders and traditional healers. There's a strong move now also with a lot of developers and people that want to help develop the community, had developed South Africa, develop agriculture. They're starting to turn towards the South African traditional leaders that have vast lands under their control. Their hands have been sort of cut off. They have limited control over it. They control the land. They can grow food on the land and do also, they can't control the electricity and etc. But they can control the food growing on the land. And they also have rights to now, grow marijuana and all the previously illegal substances. So there's a swing towards farmers and farming groups to start working with the traditional leaders, which is huge for Africa, away from the political arena.
Terrific news.
I've always found it absolutely fascinating how any human being could make God's creation illegal. And you have to understand that marijuana is a natural plant.
Well,
how
Rockefellers there, the Rockefellers, right?
Yeah.
The Rockefellers starting with the hemp and essentially beginning with hemp, as you know, Charlie, that was really the genesis point of taking down from natural living.
Yeah. And even now we're looking at a mask taking away our God-given right of fresh air. It defies logic. Defies logic.
Yeah.
What about if the mask is made out of hemp?
On the CDC website.
Yeah.
On the CDC website, there's actually a great paragraph, a short paragraph describing how dangerous wearing a mask actually is for prolonged periods. Because what you're creating by breathing your expelled air into your mask is you're creating basically a petri dish for fungus and bacteria and viruses to breed in right in front of your nose. So you keep a mask on for more than half an hour. You're literally breathing in bacteria.
Well, it's the detox. It's your body's natural detox. It's your body's natural detox technology. Exhalation is where we excrete and exhale all of the pathogens that have been built up in the body. You're absolutely right. Here's something to look at. Shameful, if you ask me. There is a diamond-studded
I
mask.
was just about to say something about that. That at grassroots level again, you've got people wearing designer masks.
$250,000 will buy you that bejeweled face mask from Jacob Arabo. I think the guy should be flogged myself. How cynical.
I was just about to say that. I mean, I'm walking around and people are wearing designer masks. You've got all sorts of different brands. And I was sat on the train recently, like a couple of weeks ago, for my sins, going into central London. And I was sat and I got like looked at because I was the only person not wearing a mask. And they had a Fendi mask, one person had a Gucci mask, and another girl had a Chanel mask. And I was just looking at that thinking, oh my God, this level of subordination, one, but now it's just gone to another level because they're selling designer masks. I can't wrap my head around that.
Fashionable little morons. Yeah, delightful. Yeah, but that's wonderful. I mean, that's just totemistic of the end of days. And as I keep saying, in recent broadcasts, it's so ironic that the apocalypse means the falling away of the mask. And at this time of planetary apocalypse, at the socio-ecological and psycho-cultural, emotional level, it's ironic that you've got 5 billion people in the relatively developed world who are masking themselves at the great unmasking epoch. But there you have it. That's the great paradox of the time we live in.
I'm not sure if I mentioned this earlier while we were already live or recording, is that in the last 24 hours, Trump tweeted that Antifa is about to be declared a terrorist organization. Did I bring that up yet? And the effect that will have.
It's very important.
No, not yet.
Yeah, that is a huge breakthrough. That's a huge breakthrough, and that's gonna. I believe that's gonna have a very interesting and a very important knock-on effect to deal with the crime, the looting, the violence, and the death that's resulted in the left going rampant.
Black Lives Matter.
Basically also, fighting for survival.
If you go on,
well, bigger than that, in a sense, in terms of what's going to crack the zeitgeist, is the Center for Disease Control, which is, you probably all know, was at the genesis of all of this pandemonium. Charlie's gone off. Are you still hearing me at all?
Michael's gone off.
Oh, that's fine. Michael's gone off. Okay. Is that the CDC have just fessed up, I believe, in the last couple of days, that actually, despite having put out all of those huge figures about the morbidities, the deaths in the United States attributed to COVID-19, they finally confessed that only 6% of the COVID deaths were COVID deaths without any other morbidity factors, which means that it's more or less 6%, which would be a few thousand people. I think about 9,000 people would have died, which makes this less than anything remotely connected to a kind of a pedestrian virus breaking out on the back end of an influenza seasonally. So that little piece of information should extrapolate all around the world now. But how long will it take to do that?
This is it. This is how much will this transitional time be? Because while the truth is, people like yourselves, you're doing these wonderful shows, podcasts, etc. But we understand. But when I talk to people at my level, at grassroots level, as I keep saying, you know, Charlie, you were really annoyed this morning about wanting people to wake up because of the children being quarantined or, you know, taken away. You know, there is this, we've got a long way to go. It's not just going to happen overnight. Yeah, we know, we have an understanding. As you said, you know, I've woken up very rapidly in these last 4 months. I have a long way to go myself, but until the mainstream media, until we don't see the changes within the mainstream media, you know, it's going to take some time.
As Charlie says, and that's entirely correct. I'm so happy to hear you when you said that, Charlie, that you had that corroborated, that the media is the last to go down. I've also maintained this for a very long time, that the sort of more Sabbatean Zionist element issuing out of the Levant will go down at the end, as will the media. But then those crypto Sabbatean Jewish elements, and this has nothing to do with Semitism, so don't anyone ever try to throw that shit in my face. I'll slay you. But we're talking about a Sabbatean Khazarian element operating within the atom seed of evil that has come out of Mossad and Israel. Fact. Let's not bandy about the bush. And that is absolutely the enterprise of the Crown of England and the Vatican complex. That thing needs to be attended to, and it will, I believe. People have been saying, why has Trump been allowing that to stand for the last 4 years? Why didn't he take it down? Say, for God's sake, the man has to choose his battles. You know, you do one step after the next. Even if you are Alexander the Great, for the love of God, you still have to get to where you're going on a horse, and you have to feed the horse. So this is just the mechanics of this kind of supra-national politicking that's been going on with the Earth Alliance and the Trump administration, and also Vladimir Putin and his incredibly sophisticated alchemy of politics. It takes time. There is going to be an absolute takedown of the media, but I love what you said, Charlie. So glad to hear you corroborate that. You have to let the mirror remain on the wall right up until the end, and only as you're taking the caster down, remove the mirror, not before. It's important that people all around the world can see the fiction of their own lives, the fictionalization of their own reality, that each one of them in their self-determined idiocy, frankly, and in this state, COVID-idiocy, have been the ones, and paying with tax dollars, personal income tax, which is defrauding yourself, essentially. You know, we are the ones who have manifested and create and invoked this creature that is trying to destroy us. It's right and proper that we should all be looking at this thing squarely in the face at the end of days. That's what's going on. But then there will be a takedown of media, and hallelujah, I might even take up drinking alcohol then.
No,
me too. I'll second that.
The one thing.
A quick question to Charlie and Sacha, if you know anything. Do you know anything about the relationship between the South African Oppenheimers that owned De Beers and Anglo American, and the Oppenheimer that was involved with the atom bomb? Is there a connection at all? Do you know anything?
My understanding is that there is a connection, but I know that Thomas J. Brown can answer that question, and I will have that answer on an email for you within 24 hours.
Yeah, I've often thought about it, and then I lose that train of thought, and then I carry on with my life, you know, try and forget about the Oppenheimers.
Just one point that is happening right now that I've pointed out in a couple of videos is that the previous administrations of the American government, if they didn't like the regime, they went in and changed it. Trump is not going to do that. He's not going to.
And that is the key undertone of that video that I did about Trump takes over the Fed, is that the last 100 years, since 1913, the launch of the Fed, the might of the American U.S. military was used to invade and subdue any president or government or rogue element around the world in any country that stood against the Rothschild empire. So they would always come up with a fake narrative that he's a pedophile or he's using his people or whatever, and then they would invade that country, or they'd stage a fake event. 9/11 was a perfect example, obviously, to be able to invade Iraq and Afghanistan. And there have been many. Historically, the First World War, the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, and so it goes. It just never stops.
He's exposing them all.
So
now another key element here, and Alpa, there's another key element here. I've just released this morning on my social media a film I made 3.5 years ago, very short, about 35 minutes, with Robert David Steele, called Donald Trump versus the Whores of War, and that describes in that film, 3.5 years ago, we were outlining how the 1,000 odd military bases of the United States, a $250 billion rollout of military bases worldwide, were essentially Rouge faction CIA lily pads for trafficking gold and guns and drugs and little children. That is what that enormous $250 billion technology was. Now, the average Boy Eagle Scout in America, in the Navy or the Army, would never have known about that stuff. They're following orders, being good guys, good girls. But the fact of the matter is that that's what's been taking place. And when you talk about Trump taking down the deep state, decommissioning 1,000 military bases around the world and repurposing them to logistical, non-interventionist logistical infrastructure building and imagineering, that's what you're going to see on the back end of a second Trump term. I think you'd agree with that, Charlie.
100%. He's been, I was obviously aware of how they were using these military bases around the world, and I could land in any of those without any questions whatsoever of what was on board. And we'd simply load up the vehicles, go straight out on the main road, and we were through. And I wasn't actually delivering drugs or weapons. It was just cash. But it was so incredibly easy. I can see why now he's got on top of it and went, because I'm starting to learn now that I was actually the good guy delivering the cash. The other guys delivering children and drugs and weapons were the bad guys.
Good for you, Charlie.
That's great, Charlie. I love that. I love it. God bless you.
Yeah, it's
what is the feeling like in the UK, Alpa? You're right there in London. Did you sense any vibe or since the big event there, the
protest?
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to go. I went to the protest the week before, 2 weeks before. No, yeah, the week before, for the children to end child trafficking on the 22nd of August. So I couldn't go to this one over the weekend, but I heard about it, and it was really interesting. People that are in my network on social media were very quick to point out to me. No one commented about the protests, yeah, and I've been sent some images about the protests all around the world, so I just put one. And you have to be careful what you post on social media, but it was interesting that there was complete, like, oblivious to what the content that I'm posting, but the inaccuracy of the picture. They picked on, this was something from a Liverpool match many years ago. This wasn't a real protest, but turning a blind eye to the content of what I'm saying and what I have been posting on my social media for the last 3 months now, which is about the children. And it's been interesting to see this again from my people, for people that I know, is complete cognitive dissonance, quiet and silence. So that's just from my network, Michael. But yeah, there's the truth community that I've formed relationships with and have aligned with. I mean, it's huge. We're all happy like that this movement's going to it's happened. But we've been talking about this for the last 2-3 months, that it's going to happen. We've been saying that within our own networks, that there's going to be protests. So it's the start, but how we're still a long way away, I think, until the elections. So for people to actually understand what these protests were about, what they were for, people are still locked in the narrative of, just another conspiracy theory, unfortunately. See, I flip between the two sides. I speak to people like yourselves. I'm a part of a truth community, and then my friends and the people I speak to on a day-to-day basis. So it's sort of the two polarities that I'm at, and it's synthesizing those two polarities to neutralize this, and it's going to take a long time, Sacha.
Well, I think you're going to find that the Sabbatean deep state element, dying as it is on its feet, is still a very dangerous creature. And it's very weaponized, as we've seen through the CDC, Bright, World Health Organization. Now they, of course, are all recanting feverishly and taking back what they said, because they're going to be on the bitch end of millions, hundreds of millions of private prosecutions for having misinformed the public in the public health sector, and then franchising that misinformation and disinformation globally through the compact of the United Nations to every health ministry in the world, which issued mandates to every hospital and clinic and doctor and nurse in the land, and forced ill health essentially upon the people of the world by the Public Health Administration sector. Well, there's an irony for you. So that stuff is about to be really tap into the zeitgeist. The next seasonal flu that hits Britain and the Europe and the world at large is going to see probably a tremendous spiking in very serious ailment and death. Why? Well, that will be because for the last 6 months, hundreds of millions of people have been wearing goddamn masks and depleting their autoimmune system by about 17% to 20%. That is significant. You deplete oxygen intake and deplete your autoimmune system by 17 to 20% for 6 months. You're talking about taking yourself 15, 16, 17% closer to the grave. That's how it actually equates. Think about it. But people aren't computing yet. So to get back to your concern about people just not waking up, I think you'll find with the next flu cycle, there's going to be a lot of anomalous responses and reactions going on. And the Sabbatean element are hoping that that happens, because that will then prove the myth of the corona thing, and then allow the governments to continue with the enforcement protocols like isolation and quarantining, blah, blah, blah. Do what we say, or we'll drag you off to Guantanamo Bay, government style. So we've got all of this weird orchestration of chaos that has been set into play. I'm keen to know what Charlie thinks the rescue model is going to be before the next planetary flu cycles really kick in.
Well, I was told very early on that there would be a second lockdown to cover up the amount of people who died from, number one, the people that should have had operations between March and July that were cancelled because of the supposed influx of COVID-19 people. Number two, people that would die because their immune system was low from wearing a mask. Number three, people who would die from suicide because they found out they'd been lied to and lost their businesses, lost their houses, lost everything else. And number four, people who die from heart attack from the complete shock of what's happened without them realizing. I was told that 3 months ago that would happen. The second lockdown would be to cover up this, and it would all be blamed on COVID-19.
So I'd like to share some positive news.
What's the rescue protocol that you envision, Charlie? That was the question, really.
Right, I think when we come out of this, I think people will wake up to a great awakening, and I can see that the current governments will fall in most countries. And we've just had something very interesting happen here in Spain, which plays into this. We've had the police who realized their pension fund is no longer there. So they pointed a finger at King Juan Carlos. He stole it because he's been arrested and gone to Gitmo. Well, you can't spend that kind of money in Gitmo. I know that for a fact. So they blamed him, but they'll wake up to the fact that the government, and this will happen worldwide, people will wake up that every pension fund, but not just the police. So then the police will stand down. So the military will take control. So we'll go under martial law, which is part of what we need to do to move into the next level. So then the military will wake up that their pension fund is the same as the police pension fund because it's a government pension fund. It's all been stolen. So the governments will be removed. Then what I see happening is that we will have a NESARA GESARA government that won't have a leader as such, like a political party leader, which a number of people will come forward and say, look, I will represent you as the people. And we will be given a choice as to who we want. It's got nothing to do with party politics. It'll do with individuals who are prepared to stand up and work for us as people. And I see that coming organically. I wanted a big yahoo to GESARA and NESARA. I can't see that happening. I can see Trump running it very smoothly. We're starting to see it with when the police are standing down already in Spain and in France. They're standing down because they've realized that they're not leaving their jobs. They're back in the police stations rather than on the streets because their pension funds have disappeared. And then I'll see that this just allows the military to come in, martial law, very discreetly, and they'll be welcomed in by the people. And then when they realize it's the government that stole it, people will rise up against the government to remove the government. And then, of course, the new GESARA government, NESARA government, the first thing they'll do, we'll pay your pensions. So they'll be welcomed in with open arms. And then the rest will just fall into place. That's how I see it as to the future. And it'll be far more smooth than I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be all bells and whistles, but I just see it being a transition of beauty.
So what's the collateral going to be behind the new pensions?
Well, all the money that's been stolen by all the corrupt people, the money that's been recovered from the Vatican, that Trump now has in Fort Knox, and also there's a new vault in Texas, huge one that's been built underground. Everything that's been taken out of the Vatican, everything that's been recovered from the Venetians, everything that's currently being recovered from the Philippines, the gold, not just the Philippines, Thailand, Cambodia.
The hereditary collaterals. Well, 1 second, that's beautiful. Sorry, Michael, I'll give way to you in a minute. But this for me is so important that people get this bit. I've been working since 2005, Charlie, on various elements within the hereditary collaterals. I want to take a call with you at some point privately to talk about this. But I'm so glad to hear you say that you too believe that the hereditary collaterals will once again be restored and take over from this fiat bullshit. Because that to me is where, sorry, my dogs have gone crazy. That's where the regenesis will truly happen, economically. Beautiful.
I can't say too much because I'm under an NDA, but what I can tell you is that I'll be working with them to move the assets around the world to back the new currencies. And I can tell you that I've actually visited the underground bunkers in Vietnam, Cambodia, and the Philippines, which total 176, I think, at the moment, that are absolutely rammed full of cash and gold.
And are you dealing with?
Did you sneak a few bars of gold here and there?
Yeah, I would have loved to. I've got some photographs I can send you.
I'd like to share another scenario with you. Okay.
Yes.
So here we are, 2 months away from 3rd of November. Trump's going to win. That's going to send a very strong message to all presidents and leaders and prime ministers and governments of other countries. If you don't do what we've done in the USA, we're coming after you. So I believe that that the president and leaders of other countries will then do to their central banks what Trump did to the Fed. Okay, take control of it, taking the control away from the Rothschilds. Remember, they don't have armies and guns and military. They depend on the military of the puppet masters and the countries that they control. So suddenly when the country takes control of the central bank and they control their army, the Rothschilds are they're like a toothless shark. So literally within days or weeks, and hopefully not months, all the central banks of all the countries will be taken over by the current leaders, presidents, and prime ministers. That'll take the Rothschilds out of the game. And then they continue doing what Trump has been doing. Once you have control of the central bank, this is just the tool to put all the debt of the people onto the Rothschilds. So you create bonds and you create papers and negotiable instruments, and you just lodge these with the central banks, and you make them go bankrupt. You let the Rothschilds carry the debt of the entire world. You bankrupt the entire global terrorist organization, the largest organized crime syndicate the world has ever imagined. You make them go bankrupt. That's how I see that happening. And on the back of that foundation of the Rothschilds losing their control of all the central banks of all the countries that they've held captive for 250 years, and especially the last 100 years. On top of that, we will start implementing the one small town plan of action with the large funds that are coming through now. So once the one small town thing hits in any country, and I believe the USA is obviously the critical one, because if we have a successful launch of one small town in the USA, if it happens there, it's literally going to be an unstoppable, not a domino effect, a quantum domino effect across borders, across countries, and you're not going to be able to stop it. And what happens then is that the small towns will become so successful financially and so rich financially, and that then while we don't have to use the money because we're doing it for ourselves, remember that's a simple philosophy. So what happens is that while we are using all this money and putting all the debt onto the Rothschilds around the world and all the central banks, we're creating funds and wealth for ourselves without having to use the money itself, at which point that penny finally drops for people. We don't need money. We need each other, because money does nothing. People do everything.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. I couldn't have put it any better than that. And it was almost like you'd listened to the conversation in the White House with what you said earlier.
You you challenger.
Exactly.
So I didn't get that, Sacha. What did you say?
I said, you Jesuit spy, you.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to have the three of you with me this morning to discuss this, or this afternoon for you, Sacha, in Bali. But thank you very much, Sacha. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Alpa, for joining me this morning. It's been an absolute education and incredibly uplifting. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, guys. Thank you as well.
Thank you very much, Charlie.
My first round table, so.
And Alpa, Vanita Patel, I want to hook her in with you. She's in London. She couldn't make the broadcast. And Charlie, she's very keen to meet you as well. So maybe we can connect on email.
I think that would
yeah,
be
no,
if I may throw in a last thought as well to you, Charlie, is I saw my very good friend Peter Herman, who I've toured Germany and Europe with. He's a phenomenal guy. He was the translator in Berlin for Robert Kennedy on stage. That was doing the translation for Robert Kennedy in Berlin. So I spoke to Peter immediately after that, and him and I are going to have a conversation about the whole Berlin event and what's happening there. He is totally in the heart, plugged into what's happening in Berlin and the movement there. I suggest he might be a really good guy for you to talk to, maybe a round table, and also to meet with Sacha. If you haven't met Peter yet, he's an incredibly smart and conscious and very well-informed individual on this, because I believe that Germany, and especially because the Germans can still smell the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. Yeah. That sense of revolution and breaking down the Berlin Wall is still alive in the hearts of the Berliners, and I think I can sense something dramatic and beautiful coming out of Germany.
Yeah, they won't let the Gestapo 2.0 emerge there. You're absolutely right. I don't know this man, but I'd like to meet him. I do know Kennedy, and Kennedy very kindly opened up the World Health Sovereignty Summit that we just produced a few weeks ago. And what a remarkable man he is. Yeah.
So on that note, I'm happy to say thank you very much, Charlie, Alpa. Good to meet you. Such to see you, brother.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much. Lots of love.
Hi, it's Justin, and I hope you're enjoying my dad's videos. Make sure to share this video with family and friends, like and subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you get notified for all my dad's new videos. My social media will be tagged down below so you can follow it. And just remember, Jesus loves you. Thank you.